All right, we're good. I've started broadcasting and recording. So,
So, good morning, everyone. I'm Naomi Nakano Matsumoto, and I'm the Senior Director of Social Justice at the YWCA Silicon Valley. On behalf of the YWCA, I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning for this very critical dialogue. It's a dialogue that we shouldn't need to have. This pandemic has illuminated what communities of color have known and experienced since this nation's existence. I am, however, so grateful to know that this does not reflect the majority of our community, and that there are many people who, just like these 4 superstar women who are on our panel, who are on the front lines and addressing this every day. I want to thank our social justice team here at the YWCA for coordinating this webinar. And a special shout out to Lena Lalwani and Avani Bhatnagar for leading this with their committee of Leilani Castillo and Maya Warden. We are very honored to have a distinguished panel. I can't see. We're very honored to have 4 distinguished and badass AAPI women joining us today. I personally am grateful that they are my colleagues, my mentors, role models, and most meaningful to me, my friends. Thank you, Akemi, Margaret, Sarita, and Sameena for joining us. Knowing that you are all out there provides me with a sense of safety. I will now turn it over to Akemi Flynn, who will be facilitating this discussion, but I wanted to say a few words about her. Akemi has over 25 years of experience working for equity and multicultural community building in Silicon Valley. Most recently, she served as executive director at PAC, People Acting and Community Together, a multi-faith, multiracial organization leading grassroots community organizing for racial and economic justice. Akemi is excited to bring her experience and relationship working with leaders from the nonprofit, philanthropic, public policy, corporate, business, faith, and cultural communities to serve as ALF's network weaver. She is a proud mother of 2 young adults and a member of the class of, I think, 33? Or, I can't remember.
Sorry, 27. It's okay.
27, and wife of another senior fellow. And personally, Akemi and I have known each other for many, many years as we started off working in grassroots organizations and getting our hands dirty as social workers. And so thank you, Akemi, for joining us. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Naomi, so much for that kind introduction, and to you and your team for creating this opportunity to have a meaningful conversation with amazing AAPI women. And I am now going to, forgive me, I'm going to read because I just want to introduce our 3 panelists who I know, but whose bios are so impressive, so I don't want to lose track of any of the details. So first we have Mayor Margaret Abe-Koga, who is the mayor of the city of Mountain View. And she is in her third term on the city council and has previously served as vice mayor in 2008 and as mayor in 2009, making her the first Asian American female to serve in those capacities in Mountain View's history. Thank you, Margaret. Professionally, Margaret has served as government relations manager at Synopsys, district director for State Assembly member Evan Lowe, corporate and foundation relations manager for Asian Americans for Community Involvement, and associate director for Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute, AAPI, at De Anza College. So a wealth of experiences to share with us today. And next we have Sameena Usman, who serves as the government relations coordinator for the San Francisco Bay Area office of the Council on American Islamic Relations, as we say, CARE, and is a board member for Secure Justice. Sameena advocates for legislation impacting civil rights, privacy protections, and an equitable society. In her meetings with Bay Area elected officials, she highlights issues facing the Muslim community, including hate incidents and civil rights complaints received by CARE. She actively works to build bridges with communities conducts interfaith dialogue, educates youth, and empowers the American Muslim community. And our third speaker is Sarita Kohli. Sarita is the president and CEO of AAPI, Asian Americans for Community Involvement. AAPI is a health and wellness organization advocating for and serving the marginalized and vulnerable ethnic communities in Santa Clara County. For over 20 years, Sarita has worked to expand access to linguistically and culturally sensitive health, behavioral health, and wellness services. As a direct service provider and advocate for refugees and domestic violence survivors, Sarita has seen firsthand the impact of violence and trauma on physical and emotional health. Sarita is passionate about equity in healthcare and access to resources, particularly for those impacted by poverty, gender-based violence, and mental illness. So, wow, you three are really impressive professionally, and I know you carry the work that you do in your professional and public spheres into everywhere you walk in your personal lives. So I really appreciate you being here with us and sharing from your experience. So we are going to jump in to the dialogue, but actually first, let me just let folks know that Lena and Avani will be monitoring the chat. So for those of you who are joining us, viewing, they will do their best to be tracking any key questions and helping me to identify those and bring those into the dialogue. We will do our best. We may not get to answer all of the questions, but we want to invite you all to participate in that way as well. So are our three speakers ready as we shift? Okay. So the YWCA has provided so much leadership in terms of women's issues over many, many years, and has stepped up really in recent months with our COVID situation to issue the challenge of fight the virus, not the people. And I just want to highlight a couple of things and then invite you into sharing your stories and your experiences. So to highlight some of the issues impacting the Asian American communities and AAPI women in particular, there was a hate crime tracker created called Stop AAPI Hate, created by the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council and Chinese for Affirmative Action. And that was created just as more and more community members were sharing about the hate incidents that they were experiencing and witnessing. And just in the first month from when it was created, I believe in late March, nearly 1,500 incidents were reported of verbal harassment, shunning, physical assaults, etc. That gives you just a little glimpse of the kind of experience that people are having in the community. And then, of course, we put it in the larger context where xenophobia is being perpetuated by politicians and leaders across the country. And interestingly, AAPI women report instances of hate and discrimination more than men, exactly 2.3 times more, in fact. And so that may be something for us to pay particular attention to. So I'm just going to open up for all three of you, whoever wants to step in first, sort of in the broad question of, from your knowledge and your experience, what are the unique challenges that AAPI women are facing during COVID-19? Margaret, Mayor, would you like to start us?
Sure, thank you. And I just want to thank you all for having me on this panel with such distinguished colleagues here. And thank you to the YWCA and Naomi and your team for all that you do for women in our community, especially during this difficult time. So I was thinking about, as being an Asian Pacific American woman, being the first in Mountain View to serve in this capacity. And, I would say that COVID-19 has resurged some of the sentiments and incidents that I think we've all experienced over time. When I was mayor back in 2009, I was just thinking about that. And at that time, I had received hate email from folks saying, you don't belong here, go back to where you came from. So here we are again, over 10 years later, dealing with similar situations. And I think as women, and this is something I personally have felt, is that oftentimes we endure these types of incidents and don't share them. Back in 2009, when I got this hate mail, it was right before I was going to take the mayor's seat on. I thought about, what do I do with this? And it was actually, I was talking to a colleague of mine, a white male, and telling him that this had happened. And for me, unfortunately, I think for us, it's sort of common. So, it was like a matter of fact situation. But when I told him about it, he was shocked. Like, he did not know that stuff like this happens. And that's when I thought it was important to speak out. So I did back then. And I think now too, here we are in this situation. And I think it is important for us to speak out for those reasons, because even though it might be common for place for APIs to, to experience this, for the general public, it might not be as well known. And I think it's important to, to put it out there, to speak up, to educate the community, and to saying, yeah, this does happen even in the Bay Area, as diverse as we are, even in, in Santa Clara County, and that it's just not acceptable. So as women, yeah, I think, we tend to probably hold it in, but for me too, I'm gonna be 50 next week, and I'm in a different place now where I just think, we just have to speak out. So I appreciate this forum and that creating that network of support where we can feel comfortable doing so.
Thank you, Margaret. And thank you for helping us also to understand the context of the current situation of anti-Asian hate and attacks. It's really not something new, right? You've shared about it in cycles in your own life, and it goes throughout our country's history. So thank you. Sarita or Sameena, would you like to share about your own perspective and experience?
Yes, so, I just wanted to, I agree with the mayor in that you would think that we're in the Bay Area, it's a diverse community, pretty progressive, that this stuff doesn't happen over here. But unfortunately, hate incidences, do happen over here. And especially, the Muslim community has been the target of such hate incidences. We had just, I believe it was last year in Sunnyvale, a family was, mowed down by a car. A guy, he thought that they were a Muslim family and wanted to, attack them. And a little girl ended up getting into the hospital and, with serious injuries. So, this stuff does happen over here. I mean, you have, either leaders being, continually given hate mail, mosques that have been receiving bomb threats, including the mosque that I go to, where my children go to school over there. And it's really scary. We've had to actually shut down the school, a few times because that this has happened. And most recently, you see that the hate incidences, you see a lot of Muslim leaders, they have turned their sermons into virtual sermons, because now all of the mosques are, closed, which is, a side note, it's been really difficult, especially during the time of Ramadan. This is the time, we're in the holy month of Ramadan, where Muslims are fasting all around the world. And this is a time where people usually go to the mosque more often than before. And so now mosque leaders have been turning their sermons virtually. And we have had Muslim leaders had their Zoom calls being, bombed with terrible images, child pornography, images of 9/11. And there's this a female Muslim scholar who, that happened to her, and she's in the Bay Area, and, she was just absolutely horrified by this. So, again, in terms of hate incidences, yeah, we definitely do see it in the Bay Area, especially leading up to the initial the presidential election in 2016, where on the night of the election, you had a woman who was choked with her own hijab. You had a woman who was pushed in front of an oncoming uni train. You've had other incidences of discrimination. There was a girl, she's actually a classmate of my son's, and she was pulled off of a flight because of her scarf. So, I guess because Muslim women are very visible, especially with the hijab, they tend to be the target of a lot of these hate incidences. Now, whether or not they report it to us, that's another story. I mean, we encourage people to report these things to CARE. We encourage people to speak out about it. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are just, as the mayor said, we just kind of we try to either ignore it or shrug it off. But this needs to be absolutely reported to us. One other thing that we are doing also is that we're providing bystander intervention training. We've been doing that all around the Bay Area for years, but we've also, been even doing it virtually, where we're training the community on what to do if they see somebody who is being targeted, and how to either diffuse the situation or get the targeted person out from that. So, these are some of the steps that we're taking, and, it's unfortunate that these things are still happening, and especially in the Bay Area, but we're all doing our part to stick together and work with each other and try to uplift each other's communities.
Thank you so much, Sameena. And I do realize that it's a little, I don't know, ironic, but it's a different question to ask you and to ask a Muslim woman, about an uptick in hate and anti experiences in the community. So thank you. Not new to COVID and been going on too long. Thank you. Sarita, what would you like to add from your role and your experience?
So, I think the concept of the other sort of has always existed. And whenever there's a crisis or something, people need somebody to point fingers to. And unfortunately, leadership in the country has, if anything, fanned those flames rather than diffuse them, which is what leadership should have done at a time like this. So, the time calls for unifying, not being divisive. So we definitely have seen, and I will share from the perspective of the people that we're serving. And, we've had incidents of people being turned out by landlords. Some of our clients that have, that they rent rooms, they don't rent the whole home. And the landlord has sort of turned them out. And, the pretext could be, we'll get COVID from you in some way because they're Asian. And, we don't know what market you're going to or who you're associating with or whatever. I don't think people come out and say it quite as well, but, for one excuse or another. And I know that, San Jose has passed and there's all these initiatives around, eviction notices, but our clients, particularly their women, are, in normal circumstances, they will not escalate that to a legal situation. And currently they're extremely fearful. And so they'll end up, calling for shelter or looking for other resources in that way and not being able to avail of those situations. The other thing we've seen happen is with COVID is a lot of our clients, particularly those who are domestic violence survivors, end up being in service industries. They work as caregivers, they work as childcare workers. And so, again, it's a double-edged kind of thing. It's, one could say it's shelter in place as the place is closed, and that's why they're being let go. But there are also caregivers who are being let go for racism and for reasons that have to do with them being Asian. And so, anecdotally, of course, we hear these things from our survivors and people who are looking for resources. And we've seen a huge uptick in people needing financial assistance and groceries and just the elements of basic living. So it's been extremely troubling. And, we're sort of trying to escalate the issue and bring it forward in front of our electeds and other people to sort of say, hey, this has to stop here. It's, whether it's this community or any other community. I was actually really surprised to see the statistics that API women report 2.5 times more than men. I was really surprised to see that, because I thought in our culture, typically women tend to be, as Margaret said, they tend to endure, they tend to take it in, and and you deal with it as stuff happens. You just move on. You don't make waves. So I'm pleased to see that people are bringing it forward, because unless we bring it forward, we're not going to be able to address it. So thank you for creating this platform and for allowing this to go wider than the few people that we know. It needs to be out there, and so I'm really grateful to the YWCA for putting this forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarita. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge just the diversity within the Asian American AAPI communities, and we've heard some reflected in what you all have shared, but just want to highlight that for a moment, that we're hearing glimpses into different segments of the community, and yet there's even more, right? There's even more that we can be beyond this, having conversations with our colleagues and our neighbors. It may be virtual conversations, but understanding people's diverse experiences, and to underscore the point that you've made about when you have that many complaints being filed, that is reflective of a much larger number and diverse experience out there, unfortunately. And on that note, I just wanted to also raise the issue that because we have such diversity, or in the context of having so much diversity in our Asian American and AAPI communities, there's also complexities within our communities of multi-generational citizens of the US, immigrants, and the different kind of threats that different community members and vulnerability that different community members may be feeling because of immigration status, because of language, cultural access, etc. And it can be, this may be a little bit messy, but I just want to raise the issue of how sometimes we're actually pitted against each other, right? That Sameena talked about, somebody who was perceived to be Muslim, or a family who was perceived to be Muslim who was attacked, right? And so we can look back in history when Japanese Americans were incarcerated, right? And how many other Asian American communities said, I'm not Japanese, right? And we see some of that now with attacks, anti-Chinese attacks. And then, of course, it doesn't stop, right? It goes across, but I just want to name that as an added complexity to the issue, and how important it is, therefore, that we, in this panel, right, diverse Asian American women are holding this together, representing experiences of diverse members of our community, and recognizing that we need to stand together in that. And so I'd love to then, on that note, shift over to just asking you, what does it mean to you as an Asian American woman, as an Asian American leader, and you may identify yourself in other ways, right? What does it mean to you to be standing up and naming these kind of issues and being a leader in addressing this? What does it mean to you that the YWCA has provided this kind of leadership? And maybe just what's been rewarding, what's been challenging about that as an Asian American woman? And who would like, we don't have to go in the same order. Who would like to go? Sameena, you want to go next?
I feel like I've been called by the teacher. No, I mean, I think, again, it has been an honor to serve the community in this capacity. I've been with CARE. This is my 15th year working for CARE. And it is, important to highlight, like some of the unique challenges that the American Muslim community faces, and to help provide services to the community, whether it be legal services, whether it be, working on legislation or whatnot. But I think the biggest thing that we do is really education, and it's informing people of what their rights are, whether it be in a pandemic or not, because oftentimes people don't know what their rights are, especially if they're dealing with, federal law enforcement, or, about housing rights, or about, unemployment benefits or anything like that. So now those are some of the services that we're providing at CARE, because oftentimes people may not know where to turn to, or, or where to go. And to be able to provide, the majority of our services, they're free. It is something incredibly important, especially if there are people who are, don't have the financial resources in order to provide this, or to be able to receive this type of legal help. But, I think the big thing is that, we also want to make sure that the community is informed about, what are some of the local laws. I remember in the very beginning, people were like, no, shelter in place, do we really need to not go to the mosques, especially people who go 5 times a day for the 5 daily prayers. And so, really to emphasize the collective, the narrative that no, we need to follow the shelter in place. This is, we need to make sure that that everybody is safe. And so that was, something that, we worked on in order to amplify that message. And this is the first time ever, that any of this has ever happened. I think there's a first for all of us in terms of, this type of shelter in place. And it has been quite an adjustment for the community, but, being able to provide the informational resources in a new digital kind of capacity is something that we've been working on. We have like daily programming on, knowing your rights, about the issues, about, about the census. That's an important thing that we want to make sure that people, know that they need to fill it out, and that we need to have everybody be counted. So it's been, it's an honor again to serve the community, and to be able to, help people receive the resources that they, truly are in need of.
Great, thank you. Just the importance of you all and many other Asian American women being leaders, trusted leaders in the community, and the organizations that you represent, and institutions that you represent, who are trusted by the community. Thank you. Mayor Margaret, what would you add? I know I've been really moved over the years of hearing you share your story as a elected official and as a mother about what it means to be an Asian American woman. So what can you share with us about what that means to you at this time, standing up against hate, against racism?
Thank you. I've often shared, why I've gotten involved in public service. And I grew up, my parents were immigrants and didn't speak English. So as soon as I could speak English, I was their translator. And through that lens, I saw discrimination and injustice quite often. And so for me, I felt that, it's important to have a voice, and that everybody should have a voice regardless of who you are. And that was what has really driven me to seek public service as a career. And I think more as we have in this situation, I feel the importance of being a representative of our community, our AAPI community. For one, it's grown quite a bit in our city of Mountain View. We'll see what the census says, but we're at 31%. So a third of our city is AAPI. And I'm excited to see the advancements. So our council right now is very diverse. It's probably the most diverse it's ever been, with my vice mayor is AAPI as well, Akemi. We have a Latino council member, Lucas Ramirez, LGBT. And so I'm very proud of that advancement. And in that sense, it's made it easier for me to, to speak out when we need to. I just recall, and part of it again might be my age, but, being the only non-Caucasian and being female, There were times when it was challenging to speak out, or when I did, you know, folks would say, was using the race card. And that would make it hard for me to speak out. But now that I have support, it definitely makes it easier. So I'm very grateful for that. I also think that, you know, and because of that, I definitely have to be more vocal. I was really proud to introduce in our city a resolution against anti-Asian sentiment and xenophobia. And I have to thank the county, the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. They actually did that first, and we were able to basically replicate their resolution. But when I did it this time, it was kind of matter of fact again. And what was most gratifying was that afterwards, the stories came out, but also just a lot of support from the community, you know, thanking us for doing that and taking that stand. And it wasn't just from APIs, but it was from, you know, other individuals, folks of other backgrounds who were just, you know, thanking us for doing this. Last night, actually, I'm on the Cities Association of Santa Clara County Board, and we passed a resolution as well. And again, although there was one person who questioned why we were doing this, and yet everyone chimed in and said, you know, this is really important to stand up the API community, to let them know that, you know, we are here as government, as city leaders, you know, and we have your back. And so I'm hoping that that'll make it easier for folks to come forward, and also to just, you know, again, say this is not acceptable. And I think that's what our role in city government is. As mayor, I feel like I have a bully pulpit this year, especially, and I'm trying to, you know, take full advantage of it when I can. This being the, you know, issue that has come forward, you know, we definitely have to take a stand. So, and I think, you know, thank the Y and other organizations for being there to support what we do.
Thank you so much, Margaret, for using your leadership and your role as mayor to really lead on this issue. It's so important. Thank you. And Sarita, you were part of writing a statement early on, or I think two statements from the first days of the unfolding of the hate in response to COVID. Can you share with us about that experience? What drove you to, when you were also like leading this organization, you know, what drove you to take that stance? What was the process like, and what has the response been?
Well, thank you. I think that, you know, as a leader of a community organization, I think it's a privilege, and I feel like we're in these positions you know, we're lucky to be in these positions, and so it behooves us to use that position to make some kind of an impact and to draw attention to an issue which is so critical to our community. And so early on, as you said, when this was happening, you know, I had reached out to Michelle and from the Health Trust, Michelle Liu, and Richard Konda from the Asian Law Alliance, and we sort of together put a statement together and put that out there, because we really felt like it needed for people to, you know, notice that this is happening, and it's not an isolated incident, but the, you know, as we were hearing from AB3 Khan, also the number of incidents that was happening varied from, you know, like a terrible look or a crossing the street to actual assault. And so I think it, you know, it was something that really needed to be called upon. And I'm so glad that the county, as well as the city of not just Mountain View, but also San Jose, their council also passed a resolution. I think, but what was very powerful to me is that as we put that statement out, we also got statements of support from La Raza Roundtable, and we got statements of support from the Black Leadership Kitchen Cabinet. And I think that that's at the heart of what we need to do as community leaders, is not just to think about your own community. That might be the community that's under attack today, but then, you know, tomorrow it could be somebody else. And so how do we build that connection and collaboration and support for each other? And what, you know, in ALF, we call the allyship. So I think that's really critical to do. And I am so grateful that, that the other leaders sort of reached out and, you know, proactively were like, we are writing this in support of our brothers and sisters in the other communities. So that was really critical. And I'll say a couple more things. I think, you know, D.A. Rosen and his PSA that was put out, I love that he said an attack against one of us is an attack against all of us. And so I think really sort of building that community connection and recognizing that we are all, you know, part of this community, and any one of us attacked needs to stand up for everybody else that, you know, is in that same position. And then I want to say that this is one of the other things we did is a couple of years ago, we had requested the Board of Supervisors to have the counties share disaggregated data for the API community. As you mentioned, Akemi, the API community is not a cohesive, you know, Asian community. And the disparity within the Asian community in terms of income levels, education levels, and access and health issues is pretty vast. And so when COVID hit, we also sort of wrote letters of support and went to the county public health department to say, you got to disaggregate the data by race and ethnicity. And I have to say that the county was very responsive, both Dr. Smith and Dr. Sarah Cody. Within 2 days, the new dashboards started appearing where they were showing race and ethnicity disaggregated data, which we knew that what it would reflect is that the Latinx and the African-American population is much more adversely affected. But I think it's really important to stand in allyship and in support of all of the communities that are affected in this way. So I consider my position to be that of raising the voices of all of the communities that are being impacted.
Thank you, Sarita. I think just what you shared about allyship and standing together is so critical. And just want to dig a little deeper with all three of you on that. I see this moment of COVID-19 has laid bare the disparities and the structural racism and the structural inequalities that have been part of the US history since the beginning. And the experiences of COVID-19 have just exacerbated, right, many of those inequalities. And so it's a moment when I think we are called on, we all as community leaders and the community at large is called on to lean in and look more closely at those issues. Where some of us might have been in privileged positions to not think about those things, we really all need to say, nope, this is all of our business, this is all of our responsibility. So it's a moment for solidarity, it's a moment for shared leadership. It also can be complicated with the diversity within our Bay Area, with the diversity within our Asian American and AAPI communities, to be raising the issue about concerns about hate, incidents of hate, in the context of death, right? The disproportionate death in Black and Brown communities and Indigenous communities, et cetera. And so I just want to open up that kind of messy can of worms, if you will, and invite you into how do you navigate that? Oftentimes, I think Asian American issues can be sort of set aside. So how do you navigate continuing to lift up issues of our communities at the same time as standing in solidarity and allyship with communities that are being hit really hard in perhaps different ways? And I know you are all leaders in bridge building, so you can handle this pop quiz on that messy, complicated question. Sarita, you already got us started on it, but I just wanted to see if we could go a little deeper. Any other experiences that any of you may have shared or may have had that you can share with us about how you've taken this opportunity of great pain and trauma to be doing more bridge building, standing in solidarity, or where you've had experience of folks coming and standing in solidarity with you?
So can I go on that?
Oh, great.
Okay, so I think one of the things that I mean, we're very fortunate that people reached out to us, and in the same way, I think that we advocated for the racial disaggregated data, which was a powerful thing, because I think it's really making people sit up and take notice about where the resources need to be put at this point in time. I think, we're also part of the Peace Partnership, which is this place-based initiative around 3 zip codes in East San Jose. And, we're just looking at the issue that needs to be addressed, and we're not sort of focusing on, it happens that this is a heavily Latino population over there. But the reality is the issue is of poverty and lack of access to resources. And so, we're doing sort of a lot of advocacy around that, which I would encourage all of the community organizations and leaders to do, is to look at who is in our community, not as an afterthought, but include them in the planning process. And, like one of the initiatives that came out, thank God for Silicon Valley Strong, and all this financial assistance that was dispersed, and my staff was part of that process of evaluating applications and dispersing the dollars and so on. But then there was an issue that there's a bunch of people who are undocumented, who are very much our workers and who are taxpayers and who are part of this community, but they can't have access to those resources. And now that I know that there are other funds, but there was that bringing the voices of the community forward so that people can hear that these are real concerns. And in the tech companies and all of that, people have talked about, just working from home. The challenges of working from home for many of our communities are so significant. And so, I would just sort of reiterate this part, is that we who are connected to the communities need to bring those voices forward, and and need to bring them over and over to the attention of the people that are policymakers and that can do something about it. So that wasn't particularly aimed at you, Margaret, as a policymaker, but I'm saying, because I know you're already woke, but but I think it is important that sometimes in doing this broad swath, segments of the community sort of get overlooked, and unless. And we know the squeaky wheel does get the grease, so we gotta squeak as much as we can. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think one of the big concerns is also what's happening with the undocumented communities, because they're not going to be getting those stimulus checks. They, have probably lost a lot of sources of income, and that's of real concern. And so I know that there's been, a lot of sign support letters or whatnot that have been circulating about making sure that, we have some protections in place for those who are undocumented. Also those who are in prison, or those who are, in detention facilities or whatnot. And it's a really scary place to be in, given the whole COVID outbreaks that are happening. And so, we have been working on different pieces of legislation to ensure that, again, even if it doesn't specifically deal with like the Muslim community, it deals with those who are, undocumented, or those who are, incarcerated or whatnot. And we need to make sure that they are protected, especially during this time of COVID. And again, it's not, we're going to be promoting justice. And again, justice is not just for us. So it's important to highlight these issues and push for policies that will protect, these communities and these underserved communities.
Oh, go ahead, Margaret.
If I could add to that, it's interesting. It's my daughters have said this to me. I think the model minority myth with the AAPI community, is very exists and is alive and well around here. I don't know if it's more accentuated given the high number of APIs in the tech world. But my girls have said that when at school, and I'm going to just be blunt, there's a lot to unpack here, but oftentimes, the mainstream teachers, administration, and rightfully so, they focus on the Latino community because of the gap, achievement gap, and that's rightfully so. But my girls, they feel that they're overlooked when they need help, when their API friends, students need help. There's just an assumption that they're fine and so they don't need help. And I think I do feel that. I feel that myself too. Sometimes I feel like people question, my understanding of the cause and the struggle. And yet, I feel that growing up as a daughter of immigrants, working class parents, I experienced it. But and so when in this time, I felt that that has come out, at least for me, in terms of how we've, as a city, responded to this situation. And an example I'll give is rent relief. So our city has put up over almost $3 million in city funds for rent relief. And, I've had most folks have been very grateful, and the ones who need it, we've had about 1,800 folks apply for that. So the need is there. We know it's great. My feeling was, how can we help people right away when, with hope that they can get immediately while they're waiting for the stimulus package and whatnot. And that was just from my own experience. There are times when my parents couldn't pay their mortgage, and they had to go borrow money from relatives and whatnot. So remembering that experience, I just thought this was really important to do. And yet I had folks naysayers saying, well, and we used affordable housing funds that we had. And, they would say, well, you should save that money for the affordable housing project that you need to build and whatnot. And I guess my feeling was, yes, you can say that if you're coming from a place of privilege and when you have time on your hands, right? You can look at long term, but if you're someone who needs to pay the rent, it's due in 10 days or a week, and you don't have that money, you just need the money. And that's where I felt that my experiences, my background came into play. And so my hope was that from that we could build solidarity with our other folks of other backgrounds in our community, and also raise the awareness that taking the xenophobia, anti-Asian sentiment issue, we could use that to highlight, as Sarita and Sameena are saying, that our communities are going through these challenges as well. I think folks, overlook us oftentimes, but we do experience struggles. In this situation, it's the sentiment, the hate, but through that, we could use that as leverage to highlight all of the other challenges that our communities are facing. And yes, we have poor API people in our community, but oftentimes people don't think that. And this is our opportunity, I think, to use this situation to highlight those other challenges of the API community. So in that sense, I think, it's been a good thing. It's been a positive opportunity to highlight.
Thank you, Margaret. Just highlights the importance of representation in all aspects, right? In our community organizations, in our schools, in our public policy makers, bringing your personal family life experiences to inform policy making and build relationships across the community. So thank you. So we now have a bunch of questions in the chat and just a few minutes left. So the challenge and opportunity is, there were a few folks who asked about how can quote unquote regular community members show solidarity, and what can the community do as a whole. So, we only have a few minutes, but maybe just thinking about that, I'll ask each one of you if you want to take a few minutes for your final, and you can respond to any aspect of the questions that may be useful. There's also a question about, or that feel most connected to you. Also a question about, as API women, how do you prioritize, how do you stay strong yourselves, take care of yourself as you're taking care of the community. So that one, how to other community member, I suppose others who want to be allies with AAPI community members. So there you go. You got a couple options. Give you each a chance to chime in and do our best to respond to some of the questions. Should we bounce back to Sarita, or anybody can jump in?
So I'll just take that question about how do you show solidarity, or I don't remember the wording, but how as a regular community member.
What can you do? Yeah.
I think I really liked what Sameena had said before about the bystanders training piece of it. Don't be a bystander. Don't if you see something, say something. That's to show solidarity in that way is kind of really important. And also to think about reaching out to community organizations. And you don't have to say, hey, I'm not Asian, so I'm not going to reach out to this person or whatever. But you're a member of the community of people here, and so I think there are lots of opportunities to put out statements of support, to highlight to elected officials. I mean, you may not be, I'm not Latino, but I could highlight that issue. And so I think that to think about it as this is an issue that is impacting humans here in our community, and how can we raise that forward?
Great, thanks, Sarita. Yeah, the never overlooking the opportunity, the individual choices we make on a daily basis, and then also how any one of us can join and get involved in creating structural change as well. Sorry, Sameena, I think I cut you off.
Oh no, I was just coughing. Unfortunately, I've come down with something. I'm like, hopefully not COVID, but but anyway, no, it's in terms of standing in solidarity with different communities. I mean, I think I know that a lot of like especially this is the time of Ramadan. And knowing that this is a very different Ramadan, given the fact that we're all sheltering in place. Normally, this is a time where we spend time with family and community members, and going to different dinner parties and prayer circles and whatnot. And so, it's been trying for the Muslim community. So it's nice always to get like messages of solidarity. I know a lot of elected officials had done so during Ramadan when it first started, and plan to do so during Eid, which is the holiday. But in terms of, I mean, I think a lot of community members are actively involved with providing services, like in terms of food staples. So I know that in the Muslim community, we've seen like Islamic Relief has raised over $2.1 million just for COVID relief. You have Support Life Foundation that has led 47 different organizations to distribute like 50,000 pounds of food staples. You have fundraising efforts. There was a apartment complex in a very poor community that was was burnt down, and so providing relocation services and financial needs for those people. It is, so it's important to just kind of look out and see where these organizations are collecting funds in order to distribute these, this food services or other services as well. I mean, you have like, Rahima Foundation, again, providing food and other services to the needy. Lots of mosques all around the Bay Area have been having food pantries to provide, food and other needs. So these are some of the steps that we're trying to do in order to help the community. So again, donating to these causes, it really makes a big difference. But in terms of, again, standing in solidarity, I mean, I think oftentimes you don't have to reach that far out. It really starts at home. It starts with educating your families, having these family discussions, recognizing that if there's a joke that's being said on TV, if there's a statement being said by our president, it's not appropriate. So it doesn't matter, we need to have these discussions. So honestly, this is, I think, one of the most effective ways to have that kind of impact, within our community, and to create that change. It really begins at home.
if I could add, yes, there was a question here about as API women, how do we prioritize our time during this COVID? And I wanted to say that I think the most important thing for all of us is to first of all take care of ourselves, and it is a challenge. For me, you know, I originally I was thinking, okay, let's just get through this. We have things to do. Let's just do them. But I do, as I talk with others, I see how this is impacting people in very different ways. And I think so. It is really key that we, you know, figure out what works for us and prioritize that first. And you know, I shared that I'm a breast cancer survivor. It's my 4th year now, and so to me, like being alive, being here is just so, I'm so grateful for, and it's so important. But it takes a lot. It takes a lot of self-care to keep going. And so I think that's number one. As Sameena mentioned, families, you know, we've had a lot of time to spend with our families. And it's been a great opportunity in that regard. As mentioned, I have 2 daughters, teens, and we've spent a lot of time together. And although neither of them want to pursue public service, as I listen to the conversations, I see that you know, they're understanding, and they're becoming socially aware of what, you know, what's going on, what the challenges as API women we face. So that's really gratifying. And I think, you know, for me as a mom, it's been the driver for me is to be sure I'm a good role model for my daughters, and to encourage them to be strong and to be, you know, able to speak out when needed. And so I think that's important to instill that in our children. And then, you know, if you have the extra time, I think it's helpful to, if you can, just if you want to volunteer, that's great. Or being a part of these types of forums is helpful. Someone asking about how can others be in solidarity. I think it's just raising awareness, and also being open to hearing, you know, these types of topics and issues that others face in the community, and being able to, yeah, understand that at a deeper level. And I think, in a sense, this COVID-19, the sheltering in place, has given us that opportunity to do so. So I would encourage that. So I know we have a lot of, you know, pulls along the as women, especially responsibilities, but I think, you know, it's important to take that time, that alone time, to really have that chance to reflect, and you know, make sure, just gonna do a check-in with your priorities. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And thank you to all 3 of our speakers. I feel like in some ways, we've just begun a conversation. So there's so much more to surface. And now we're seeing lots of great comments and questions from the other participants. And so just to build on what you all have said, I'll just encourage all of us, those of us who are on the screen and those of us who are in the chat, to continue this conversation, take it forward, and when you're having dinner with your family, or when you're talking with your colleagues, to be building on that. There was also a mention about how we're lifting up not only self-care and taking care of within our family and our internal communities, but how we're also sharing the stories about how there is powerful multiracial, multicultural solidarity. So not only it's really important to be raising the challenges, and then also lifting up the stories where we're moving in the right direction, right, to keep us going. So I want to thank you, and also quickly turn this over to Avani, who's going to talk to us about some next steps.
Hi. So thank you everyone for attending this webinar, for participating in it. We will be putting a recording of this webinar onto our Facebook event, which I'll link in a follow-up email. There's also going to be a survey in there, so give us any feedback on this webinar. We want to continue these moving forward and try to make them as well as we can. Thank you to our speakers for offering their wisdom and their insight, and for being so accommodating at such a short notice. Like Lena and I are so grateful to you. And I'm sure our attendees are as well for everything that you've shared with us. For the social justice team, thank you to Naomi, Vanessa, and Erica for guiding Lena and I's efforts, and for our teammates who have worked on and off on this project. And thank you to Lena for all her hard work as well. As far as next steps are concerned, Akemi and our panelists kind of touched on this, but as part of continuing this conversation on race and coronavirus, we're having a follow-up webinar on May 29th at 10 a.m. Look out for it on our Facebook. We'll be talking about the pandemic impact on communities of color, the impact of structural racism and the inequities, the lack of safety and the well-being for different communities of color. And we'll be talking about civic engagement and what's currently going on. So yeah, thank you everyone once again. Hope you have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
All right. Bye.